I'm Marianne Mancuso, and welcome to another Ram Chat. I'm so glad you're here, and as you know, I'm always excited about these Ram Chats, so thank you for joining us. Today's Ram Chat is going to be incredible. Joining us today is former Chief of Staff to the CIA Director and Director of Michael V. Hayden Center, Larry Pfeiffer. Sitting down with Larry Pfeiffer is our Chief Strategy Officer, Olivia Troye. Without further ado, I'll turn the show to you, Olivia.
Thank you. Thanks, Mariana. Well, first, I'm super excited. This is my first Ram Chat that I'll be hosting, and I'm especially honored and excited because I feel like this is more of a spy chat because I have tremendous respect for Larry and his career, and we've both spent a lot of time in the national security community, and I'm just really excited to kind of sort of go behind the curtain and really explore Larry's career, what he's done, what he sees current events to be. We'll have a little bit of a discussion of what's happening around the world, how we got here today, sort of, and sort of the dangers of it, and why and how we have two former spies, so to speak, now doing what we can more politically, which is something that is not common and we actually run from. We are not known to be political entities. We serve at the pleasure of whoever is in office, and we serve dedicatedly and unwaveringly. So without further ado, Larry, so why don't we start? And I thought it would be interesting to say, why did you choose this path of your career? Like, what inspired you to go into serving in national security? And talk about where you started your career, and kind of lead us through the path of your roadmap of what led you to kind of where you are today.
Sure. Well, thank you, Olivia, and thank you to Renew America for this chance to chat. As you said, Olivia, this is an unusual act for us former intelligence people to be out here in such a public way. But I think events in the world, and particularly events in America, have gotten us out here talking. With regards to why I did what I did for 30 plus years of public service, it really boils down to I came from a family of public service. I have a father who served in the U.S. Army for over 25 years. His father served in the cavalry and then in the Navy during World War I, and then served served the New York City court system for many years. I have relatives who served in the New York City fire department. I have relatives who serve in New York City police and some of the police departments around the area. So it just was imbued in me from a very early age that, we live in a great country. We are so lucky to be born here. And if you can find time to give back to your country in public service, you do that. And so that's what I did. Why did I choose the intel community? I knew I wanted to do public service. I was in college. I had a professor in the Russian language who had been in the military. He had worked at the Defense Language Institute for many years. And
big topic today, Larry. Big topic to have you on right now.
Yes.
With everything going on with Russia.
This was the early 1980s when I was in college, so it was the height of the Cold War. So it was all about getting people trained in Russian language and trained to understand the Russian mindset, and get us into public service. So when I finished college, I just started to apply to different intel agencies, the State Department, and NSA, the National Security Agency, where they were the first ones to offer me a job. So I went to work at NSA back in 1983 as an analyst. I worked there, kind of worked my way up the chain, did a lot of different things at NSA for about 20 years. Then I took a detail from NSA to work at CIA, got the great fortune of working for John McLaughlin, who was the Deputy Director of Central Intelligence at the time. George Tenet was the director, and got to work with them for the better part of a year. But then we had intelligence community reform, as you well know, Olivia, that took place in the wake of the 9/11 situation, the wake of the Iraq WMD Commission report. And they stood up an organization called the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. General Michael Hayden was tapped to be the first deputy of that organization. And he looked at me, a guy who was one of his NSA employees working at the deputy DCI office and said, "Hey, why don't you come help me as we set this new organization up?" So great, unusual and unique opportunity to be involved in helping build a new entity in the American government. Was there for a little over a year when then President Bush tapped him to become the director of CIA. He asked me to come with him, asked me to be his chief of staff. So I served as his chief of staff during his tenure there, which was the most amazing 3 years of my life. I enjoyed it so much, I switched and became a CIA employee, and then served Leon Panetta as his director of policy. And then after that, I was asked by Michael Morrell, who was by then the deputy director, to go to the White House and serve as the senior director of the White House Situation Room. So I served there, leading a cadre of about 100 dedicated, apolitical, nonpartisan public servants who were there to serve whoever is president, making sure that they're kept abreast of any breaking national security or world development. So I did that for a little over 2 years. Went back to CIA, finished out my career in a couple of years, and shortly thereafter, General Hayden, once again, I joke, once a chief of staff, always a chief of staff. He was working at the university, George Mason University, and he asked me if I would help him set up a center within their Schar School of Policy and Government. And hard to say no to the man. So I got involved in helping set this center up. And for members of the audience who aren't familiar with the center, our job is to inform people about how intelligence works with national security policy makers, how we support them, how we sometimes fail them, how we remedy those failures. And we do that largely through public speaking events. We put on, before the pandemic, we were putting on live and in-person events here in the DC metro area. But since the pandemic started, we've gone virtual and been doing events not unlike what we're doing here today. And so anybody interested, go to the Hayden Center. You can find us on the internet. You can find us on social media. You can find us on YouTube, and would welcome anybody's participation in our events.
Yes, and I'll say tremendous respect for Mike Hayden and all of the work that you do there at the Hayden Center. I do think it's a great place to follow national security discussions and current events, so I highly encourage you to explore that if you're tuned into this RAM chat.
Thank you.
So Larry, why don't we talk about a little bit about your time in the White House sit room, because I know that's something that you and we've served in the White House. And I think it's a unique experience to sort of explain to people kind of the role of the sit room, what happens there,
Sure.
And how it works behind the scenes. And so, I mean, I know the sit room as a people that would wake me up in the middle of the night when things were going wrong and bad, and the phone rang at all hours. And so I knew that if it was a sit room calling, I was going to pick up that call immediately because it was probably not great news. So I don't know. I think it'd be interesting for people to hear kind of how that operation comes together. And again, regardless of who is in the Oval Office, it's really, I think it's also important to kind of talk about the fact that not everyone in the White House is a political appointee. There's a lot of national security people, career people that serve there, and the sit room, I think, is one of those places, especially where you have people from across the U.S. government who monitor threats. It's an incredible place.
Well, you're exactly right. The Situation Room, just an incredible honor to be asked to go and serve as the senior director of the Situation Room. Unique place. Not a lot of Americans get to work there, either in the White House or in particular in the Situation Room. You hear advertisements about presidential candidates, and do you want them to be the one getting the phone call in the middle of the night? Well, you're right. We're the ones at the Situation Room who were making those phone calls in the middle of the night to alert the president, the national security advisor, the vice president about some conflict that broke out, a terrorist attack. In some cases, it was something that happened domestically, a mass shooting or a tornado that went through central Oklahoma. So it's the only 24/7 operation inside the White House that's dedicated to keeping our national leadership abreast of breaking developments. In addition, the Situation Room is a meeting place. Most people who are familiar with the Situation Room are familiar with that famous photograph that took place the day of the Osama bin Laden takedown. And you see President Obama and a number of the other national security leaders all crammed in this little tiny room watching a TV screen and watching the events unfold live. Well, it's that room, but it's a series of other rooms. Some people wonder, gosh, why does the president have such a small little room to make all these hard decisions? Well, as you know, Olivia, that was actually just one of 3 rooms that are in the West Wing of the White House to support national security. There is a much larger, fancier room that can seat 40 some odd people. The day of that event, they had been having meetings in the large room called the JFK conference room. But we had set up in this small room a monitoring station. It was actually set up for John Brennan so he could monitor what was happening in this counterterrorism operation. People may remember John Brennan at that point was the president's counterterrorism advisor. Then one of the meetings broke as the event was getting ready to unfold, and Vice President Biden, in fact, had seen the room and looked in and seen what it was about. And as they were leaving the room, he actually turned to President Obama and said, "Oh, hey, Barack, you got to check this room out. Come on in here and you can watch the whole thing unfold if you want." And so the two of them go walking into the room, and of course, everybody else goes in. It was obviously captivating. So they all sat down. The ironic thing is, if you look in the photograph, President Obama is sitting in a folding chair in the corner. And that's because everybody had sat down before he did. And the Situation Room staff had to scramble and get an extra chair to bring it in for President Obama. But it's a 24/7 watch operation. It's a meeting space where the hardest decisions in the world get made, decisions about life and death, going to war, making economic sanctions, et cetera. It's where all those meetings are going on right now about Ukraine and Russia. It also serves as a nerve center. So it's a communications hub for the president, for the national security advisor. Head of state phone calls get made and arranged through the Situation Room. So whenever you hear that the president is having a phone call or a video teleconference with another world leader, that's something the Situation Room does. And then the ultimate responsibility of the Situation Room is what we used to call it, the kind of responsibility around the really bad day. And that is if something horrendous happens, a nuclear attack, a chemical biological attack against the White House, a presidential assassination, we are at the hub to ensure continuity of the government, continuity of the presidency. There are undisclosed locations around the metro area and around the United States that we have teams ready to go to support whoever would be president on those occasions. So pretty robust set of responsibilities. And you're right, the entire staff of the Situation Room is detailed from national security agencies around Washington. There's not a single person in the Situation Room that is an employee of the White House, that's an employee of some political party. It's a bunch of dedicated public servants who just want to do good for whomever is president and vice president and national security advisor at the time.
Yeah, I have tremendous respect for the people that work there. It's a 24-hour operation, and I certainly have been on the tasking end of when attendees at a meeting changed, and it really I can't even describe what it's like to watch them come in, and there's protocols, and they're not only are they tracking threats, but this staff also goes in and changes the table tents and the name things. And I just remember even the seal. I'll share that kind of amusing story where at times we'd be sitting there having a meeting with the vice president, and we'd hear the president was coming down, and the sit room person would literally run in and change the seal in the background because it needed to be the presidential seal. So I mean, this is I was always sort of fascinated by the fact that it really is you do it all. You do it all in the sit room.
Yeah, I used to joke that my responsibilities could run the gamut from, alerting the president when our ambassador was killed in Benghazi, and in the next breath, I'm trying to make sure that Hillary Clinton, as the Secretary of State attending a meeting, is getting her, hot tea at the right temperature before the meeting starts. So it was quite the spread of responsibility.
Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of share some of your experiences and insights and sort of take people behind the scenes on unique views of how things come together. So now let's pivot a little bit to how you and I got here today, in terms of, I saw a tweet of yours more recently about your concern about what is happening here in terms of the trends that we're seeing. I think we both have the same kind of frame of mind that we've tracked global threats. We've tracked the trajectory of declining democracies globally, and it's unsettling and it's frightening, and it's very upsetting to watch it sort of potentially threaten our own country, right? This is now our homeland that we're watching certain trends and patterns sort of in terms of what this means for our own democracy. And I think that's what sort of led us to this moment in terms of why people like you and me and others in national security are being a little bit more vocal and are getting more involved politically and are, calling things out as we see them. And I think, this is unprecedented. You don't see statements from national security officials. I signed on to one where there's, over 100 national security former officials that have served in many administrations, both Republican, Democrat, of all political affiliations, saying we have concerns. We have concerns about what's potentially happening in future elections. We have concerns about what's happening in terms of disinformation and misinformation in this environment, and how all of this can be exploited by foreign adversaries that are just seeing this, and they're just seeing this ripe playing field to stir the pot and really kind of divide us and turn us against us. So I'll set that as a level set and sort of hand it over to you, Larry, and to talk about this. And maybe you can talk
Sure.
about why we see disinformation in this lens, why it matters to the average American. Like, why should we be paying attention to this?
So when I left government, I was going to do what most people do, like me, who exit a 30-plus intelligence-related career. Some of us just head off to North Carolina and go fishing and go to the beach, for the rest of our lives. Some of us want to keep providing a service, and we'll often do that by going to work for a contractor that's supporting the intelligence community, or maybe getting involved academically and helping to teach the next generation of national security leaders about national security. I ultimately headed down that path, and when I went to head up the Hayden Center, my goal was really to just better inform students and the American people about the intelligence community and what we do, because in the absence of people who have done this for a living talking about it, the media and others often will go to the darkest corners of the room and weave stories that terrify Americans about the misuse of this great power that's been handed over to the intelligence community to operate. And so that was my initial goal and objective. But as we headed into the 2016 election, and we saw what had happened in the 2016 election in terms of Russia's attack on our democracy, the use of misinformation and disinformation, the hiring, whether witting or unwitting, of Americans to sow division across the country, I began to realize that the experiences I had in monitoring those types of adversaries might be useful in helping to inform the American people about what these adversaries potentially could be doing inside our country, and how that could be hurting our democracy. As things have evolved, however, I began to also see things happening within this country, see behavior by people in this country that reminded me of the behavior and the activities of politicians and autocrats in failing democracies in third world countries, or worse yet, in autocratic countries where democracy has never been allowed to flourish. And I, like most people, grew up my entire life thinking, hey, America, land of the free, home of the brave. This is a place that democracy will always live. But I've come to realize through some additional research and study that democracy is actually a lot more fragile than I think we ever assumed it was. It's like a small flame that needs to be constantly cared to and tended to, in order that the flame not go out or turn into a large out of control fire. And so I felt the need to speak out about what I have seen in my intelligence career happen in these other countries, and where that led, and how seeing it here in America ought to be of some concern to people here in America about our own democracy.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. And I think, it's something that I think we all need to be paying attention to. I think we do. We sometimes take democracy for granted, but you got to care for it. democracy is fragile. So I am completely in agreement there about
Well,
that.
and some of the things we're seeing, we're seeing modifications made to election laws, solely to disenfranchise segments of the population. Most recently, we see a major political party, taking the time and energy to censure members of their party for speaking out about defending democracy. These are just terrifying things to see happen. What happened on January 6th, and seeing major politicians in this country defending these horrific actions that took place, or dismissing them, or reinventing what exactly happened on that day. This again is the kind of stuff that you see in failing democracies and in autocracies around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a question. I think that hopefully you can kind of explain or demystify the reporting that's happening right now, right currently. I think for many Americans, this is kind of confusing, and where you're seeing a lot of sort of disinformation being pushed out about this Durham report thing. You're seeing a lot of, I would say, more right-wing leaning channels kind of sort of flip the narrative on it, right? and what it is. And so I was just curious if you could, or if you're comfortable with it, just shed some light in terms of just the facts. Like, what are the facts about this?
Sure.
So that we can sort of take a step back as Americans and sort of inform ourselves and really kind of understand what's truth and what isn't, because there's a lot of confusing information out there. And I thought that you'd be a great person to hear from on this topic.
Sure. So I'm one who has generally had very high respect for John Durham and the work he has done in the past. I was an employee of the Central Intelligence Agency, which came under great scrutiny in a previous Durham investigation of renditions, detentions, and interrogations. But at the end of the day, I knew, and my colleagues knew, that if a fair Department of Justice investigation was done, that in the end nobody would be prosecuted, and we could move on with our lives. And that's ultimately what happened. John Durham put out a report that said there was nothing that he could find that was prosecutable. And so when I heard that he was put in charge of an investigation into alleged attempts by Hillary Clinton and her campaign, or by President Obama and his administration to supposedly spy on the Trump campaign, I thought, okay, fine. Yeah, it's gonna cause a lot of anguish for people. You're gonna get a lot of lawyers around town are gonna get a lot of billable hours. But in the end of the day, we're gonna see the same result. We're gonna see him say that there's no there. And what we've seen so far have been very small little cases. Individuals being accused of lying to investigators, but nothing significant has come out of the case. So I was really disappointed the other day when there was this filing put forward by the Durham investigation that, and again, I'm no lawyer, so I can't even begin to understand a lot of the legalese involved in the purpose of the filing, but it had something to do with conflict of interest and law firms representing different people and different clients. But in the course of this, there was almost a footnote or a sub-paragraph that was very carefully worded, that allowed those conspiratorially minded people to take and run with and suggest that there was some activity underway that it allowed people on the fringe, and frankly ultimately just the right wing, to make accusations that the Hillary Clinton campaign paid a technology firm to go and infiltrate servers at Trump Tower and servers at the White House to go after President Trump while he was campaigning and while he was president. And there is nothing in the filing that says anything that boldly. But even without that sort of bold extrapolation that's been made by the right wing, the original wording was not. It didn't offer enough detail to allow people to really understand what was going on. So what was going on? If you remember, there were articles written. There were plenty of press about this back at the time. But what you had was individuals who do cybersecurity investigations had noticed in the course of doing cybersecurity investigations following the hacking of the Democratic National Committee, they determined that, oh my gosh, there was actually what appeared to be some communications happening between servers at Trump Tower and some servers at Alpha Bank in Russia. No servers were infiltrated, no communications were read, nothing. This was what's called DNS, which is the DNS. It's basically like the address. It's above the IP address on your computers, and it basically just says that this server in this location made contact with this server in this location. And so there would be these anomalous, weird pings happening back and forth between servers at Alpha Bank in Russia and a server in the Trump Tower that, or maybe it wasn't even Trump Tower, but it was a server that belonged to the Trump organization. So you have these cybersecurity experts conducting an investigation, and they see what they believe to be unusual activity. They then take it to the authorities. They take it to the Department of Justice, FBI. I think ultimately they took it to the CIA. Out of a concern that, again, there was some foreign infiltration into what was happening in our elections. So all of that has been made public. There's nothing illegal about what any of those people were doing. They were actually doing a public service. It happens every day. Are these cybersecurity firms? That's their job, is to protect, to protect the cybersecurity of firms and companies and countries around the states around the United States. And so they were doing their job. So it's somewhat shameful that that the Durham investigation allowed this language to be put in this filing that could allow the greater sowing of division in our country than was necessary. I mean, technically it gets very complicated. I'm not even that technically. I'm not an IT expert, but I think if you were to talk to someone from a cybersecurity firm, they would say that this is really much ado about nothing.
Sorry, did that lose you? There he is. Sorry about that. Not sure
I thought you froze. I thought you froze up there for a moment.
Technology, or who knows? Maybe I'm. There's a cyber attack happening right now, real time, and that would be unfortunate because, here we are, awkward situations. All right. Well, so on this topic, you mentioned a couple things. You mentioned, sort of disinformation, what's happening here, foreign adversaries, exploring that, and I think I think it'd be interesting for the last couple of minutes that we have left. I think it'd be an interesting discussion to hear your thoughts about what happens when foreign adversaries get involved in sort of these social media spaces and things like that, and how that whole picture comes together in terms of how sometimes you and I, we may be in a chat channel or whatever, thinking we're talking to, someone in California or our neighbor, and you're engaging in these discussions, but truthfully, a lot of the time, some of these sources are not actually Americans and not truthful, and there's a lot of bad actors out there in this space. And I think that sort of feeds also narratives in terms of division in communities, but it also feeds narratives of the greater holistic picture in terms of what's happening in media narratives and in echo chambers as well, and how that's all kind of exploited amongst a group of people who are all sort of benefiting, right, from all of this. It's like a ripe sort of combination of bad actors who are happy to come together and sort of push this. So I don't know. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So we have a lot of people who throw the term around, collusion, that we've got foreign actors colluding with Americans to sow division in our country. And although there may be a small amount of actual active plotting going on knowingly between some Americans and some foreign actors, in most cases, what we have happening here is what I would call, and I think what my good friend General Hayden has called in the past, is convergence. So you have active misinformation players in foreign intelligence services around the world. It started with Russia, but China's very active, Iran's very active, and frankly, given the success of those three actors, we're continuing to see. I think we're continuing to see a growth amongst other countries. It's a cheap and easy way for people to sway public opinion. So what do you have? You have in St. Petersburg, some Russian Foreign Intelligence Service actor, or perhaps some criminal element in Russia that's being paid by foreign intelligence services there to put out divisive information, to put out information that is going that frankly at its face is just craziness. And so they will promulgate it out on social media. They'll either put it as a post in Twitter, they'll put it as a post in Facebook. They might establish a group in Facebook or Twitter or Instagram that then promulgates the viewpoint. Or what we're seeing a lot more now is rather than doing the initial posts, they start putting it in the commentary. So somebody else has put some post about some general subject, and then they'll then put it as a comment in responding to that overarching tweet, for example, and then it takes over the conversation in the comments. So what happens? You've got this foreign player pretending to be an American or a Western player putting this information out there. You then have some fringe elements here in the United States, be they largely on the right, but there could be some on the far left as well, whose goal is to cause chaos in this country. And so they will see this information and they will take it and they will then promulgate it on their platforms. And so you have some organizations out there. I'm not going to name them because if I name them, you and I then are going to get trolled and attacked for the next 24 hours by those organizations. But you have very far right-wing organizations in particular who will then promulgate the information. It then takes on a life of its own within those circles. And then before you know it, Fox News, OANN, some of the more mainstream right-leaning organizations will then begin to publish it as almost as if it's fact, and then before you know it, a broad segment of the American population is believing in whatever conspiracy has been laid down. So you have a convergence of interest. You have a foreign actor who wants to try to hurt America's image around the world. You have a far fringe element within the United States or within other Western democracies who is looking to cause chaos. Or heck, maybe they're just looking for clicks because they have advertisers who are going to then benefit from the clicks and they get more money. You then have more mainstream right-wing platforms who have an audience that gets excited about this kind of stuff, and it helps them sell advertisement. It helps them get ratings, and so you move forward. So again, each of them has a different reason for why they're promulgating the information, but it all converges to create this large environment of misinformation that sadly a segment of the American population resides in, and it's tragic.
Yeah. No, I think it's important to have these discussions and really talk about what's happening real time in terms of our communities and the environment of disinformation that we're facing, and how we're not always sort of aware of all the different sort of entities that are out there sort of in this space. But look, I know we're running out of time. Mm-hmm. Hopefully can you hear me okay? Okay. But I just wanted to really thank you for taking the time today to join us. I think it's super interesting to just hear from different people in different career fields who are now kind of in this space and are more politically engaged, and it's just an honor to get the opportunity to have this conversation with you, and we hope you'll come back and join us in the near future.
Well, certainly. Thank you very much, Olivia. Great conversation, great questions. People just need to be careful out, as they used to say in the old Hill Street Blues show, just be careful out there. And the crazier and more alarmist it sounds, and the less there is data backing up the assertion, the more likely it is that you're reading either misinformation or information intended to sow division. So that's my last word.
Thank you so much, Larry, and thank you, Olivia, for leading such a fantastic spy chat. This was amazing. And to everybody who tuned in, I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please be sure to join us next week for another Ram Chat with Congresswoman Cindy Axne. In the meantime, to stay up to date with everything Renew America Movement is doing and how you can tune in for our next Ram Chat or even watch previous episodes, which I hope you are, please be sure to follow us on Twitter at Renew America, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and be sure to also sign up on our website, renewamericamovement.com, for more information. Have a fantastic week. We'll chat